All right, we're back at it on the SuccessFlow podcast, and the bamboo banger of today is it's a crazy world out there right now, and we're going to talk about the concept of VUCA, V-U-C-A, and you kind of brought up the topic about how wild things are right now, some of the stuff's being thrown our way, and how we should just catch up on what we're juggling and what the people around us are juggling right now. And I threw out the concept of VUCA and some of the tools that we've gone over on this podcast before, but we could use a refresher how it really applies to the VUCA world that we're living in right now. So that's going to be our discussion for the day. We have a lot to wrap on, and just so that the listeners know, this is not fear mongering. That's not what we're about in SuccessFlow podcast. But it's talking about how to deal with how much is being thrown our way right now in the world.
Yeah, VUCA is an acronym. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's a business term, economics term, what's going on in the world, like you said, and also personal. And so I think it's a really good topic. It's timely. I think there's a lot of things going on in the world for sure, but I think also personally, I know I've found myself in ruts throughout my time, and we all go through that, but recently have gone through some ruts, and how I get out of those things is, I think is important to share because everyone's different. And so hopefully we can share some value and some tools and things to get out of those uncertain times, if you will, whether it's your personal business or, just things that you can't control out there in the world that are bringing you down.
Absolutely. Love the vulnerability, bro. That's what this podcast is about. We're trying to bring it real. And I think like back to our gap in the gain concept, it's important to talk about. We talked about some of the wins over the past year. We've done some amazing stuff. It feels like the jump was yesterday, that workshop, and myself being in Tulum, and a number of big wins this year. But back to VUCA, that's the definition of volatility, right? The ups and downs of life. And it's rapid and unpredictable change. Talk about the stock market. You talk about employment rates and jobs, the way people are hopping around. It's unprecedented right now. And then you talk about uncertainty, AI being top of mind. We haven't done a deep dive on that on this podcast, mainly because you and I are using it each and every day, but we're not experts, and we're trying to curate this experience for the listeners. But there's uncertainty on what the job market's going to look like even 2 or 3 years from now. It's growing so exponentially that uncertainty is real for a lot of people. And then the C in VUCA is complexity, which is right there with the AI as well as the economy. It doesn't make sense to people the way home prices are. It really is a conundrum. Certain age groups are looking like they're never going to be able to afford a home, which we know is not true. There's ways around everything, but it's complex. And then ambiguity. That sums up everything. It's ambiguous on what the solution is until we create the time to be intentional and really work on solutions. And ambiguity is what leads to those ruts. We get in paralysis. We have to get back to the drawing board, make a plan, and crawl our way out. So that's VUCA in a nutshell. I'm sure our listeners, a few that I talk to regularly, can relate to one of those areas, if not all. And yeah, it's just globally kind of chaotic right now. And I think conversations like this can help people put some perspective and bring some things to light.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, giving out those definitions as you were talking, it's like the uncertainty piece, I think, happens more often, in my opinion, because you can't predict the future, right? You can find alignment. You can figure out who you are, what you stand for, the goals that you have, what you're striving for. But it's still uncertainty if you're actually going to get there. And sometimes, going back to the gap in the gain, you do find yourself in the gap and, bumming out a little bit about the ideal state and that you're not there yet. And so it's catching yourself a little bit. There was a lot of great things that happened in the early part of this year. And then, it just kind of felt like, just grinding it out and just kind of just going and going and going. And like, well, what more is there, to do to get to the level that I wanted? And it's just patience, right? And when you're on the path, it's just being happy that you're on the path and knowing that things are going to happen the way they're supposed to happen. Just continue putting in the work. And that uncertainty, comes from stuff that's out of your control as well, right? So you have people that, maybe you did something, you're going along what you think is the right way, and you affected someone else in a negative way, and you had no idea. until it was brought up to your attention. Maybe you weren't helping them do their job to a high level when you're out there trying to make an impact and do things the right way. And so you learn from these opportunities and you look at it as an opportunity to resolve and not a frustration that it's there. And so when you go through these ruts, a lot of times it's hard to have that open mind and that clarity to recognize that there are maybe issues going on and using them as leverage to learn and grow and say, okay, how do I back out? How do I look at this from a high level overview from their perspective to make this right, to fix what I need to fix? And it'll make everyone better. It's just a matter of backing out of your own self and saying, okay, what are the processes and things that I can do that I can control to make everything better in the long run? And really, it just, for me, I fell out of routine a little bit. And I was crazy. I was talking to you a little bit about that, is like, just a little morning routine stuff that I would normally do. Now, in the last few weeks, we've been traveling and we've been doing some adventures and really enjoying those, which has been great. But then like getting back into the routine in between those trips was challenging for me. It's almost like I need to have multiple weeks in a row to get back into the routine. Just, what I'm finding out as I've been able to continue to grow and develop in this space. But long story short, just getting back to the morning routine a little bit, working out, been, have obviously those fitness goals that I have been on a grind. I've been really consistent with it, but the last few weeks, it's kind of just been like only 2 days a week, 3 days a week, as opposed to the 4 to 5 that I was doing. I was feeling it, which is just strange that I've had that identity shift where I need to have that consistency and that discipline in order to continue the mental piece, right? To continue the mental highs and continue the inspiration, the motivation, the self-accountability and all that stuff. So getting myself out of that rut last, like you're talking about those couple of months, it was like, dang, the jump was just 6 weeks ago. It's like right after that point, it was kind of like, okay, well, what's next? Didn't have anything lined up. Right. And so it's like, well, what's next? And it's like, man, when you're on this run, and you can feel this in sales too, right? Like when you're on a run, on a high, and you're like, bam, bam, bam. And you're like, what's next? What's the next deal? What's the next deal? And all of a sudden you go on a dry spell for a few weeks or a month, and you're not bringing in what you brought in the previous 4 or 5 months. You get down on yourself. You're like, man, like, look at my year to date though. Right. And that's where you fall in that gap.
The mindset. Valley of despair. The valley of despair comes quick. And if you don't
so it was a good reminder to, that uncertainty is like, you won't be able to predict the future. The best thing you can do is just remember who you are, where you're going, what you stand for, and the goals and the vision that you've outlined for yourself, and just continue down that path. And don't worry about the uncertainty, because the things that you're striving for will come if you continue that consistency and discipline, and just remembering that those that are around you who love you are going to love you no matter what. Like none of this stuff, the work and all this stuff that we're doing, doesn't really matter if you're on the right path and you're bringing joy to the people around you. And so whether you get to your ideal state or not, they're still going to love you. And so remembering that really helped me get out of certain areas of what I needed to do, being on these adventures with my family and all this stuff, kind of the reset and refresh that I needed to get out of that.
Everything that you just described to me is what you described was burnout. And I know that you and I are not one that accept that term. And one of the coaches, healers that I work with, she was talking through it, and she's got a lot of top performers, a lot of Junto-like 1% effort, people giving it their all, running and gunning, as Jim Stevens says.
Yeah.
And she just said the resilient are burnt out right now. And they're not stopping. The world keeps turning, right? So how are they figuring out how to cope with it? And it's becoming more and more of a thing. And we hear it in our circles. Junto is a group that we don't allow too many balls to drop. And the ones that do, the way that we prioritize our families and business, health can be the one that gets dropped. And it's typically the one that's most important, which sounds so simple. But at all the calls that I'm doing on, in my spare time, nights and weekends, working on the subconscious mind, we always wind up going back to sleep, diet, movement, connections. Are you avoiding people, or are you finding ways to get around people that don't just involve happy hour or a bender of a weekend? And this isn't the fun police, but you only get one meat suit. This is the meat suit you were given. And if you're only given one car for the rest of your life, how long would you let that car go without an oil change or a wash or a performance review. You break it down to these simple concepts, and you're right, they can go out the door because we are tired. There's a lot coming at us right now in this VUCA world. And if you're feeling those symptoms of burnout, reach out to one of us on just shoot us an email. We're having conversations with folks, and we can take that off one at a time. But burnout's a real deal. And that's what led me to the Flow Research Collective. And everything that I just rattled off in the fundamentals, those are the baseline for flow. We can't do deep, concentrated, creative work in those states of burnout. It just can't happen.
Yeah, you nailed it, right? The exhaustion, the burnout, and all that stuff. And it's like right when I started feeling, I was like, man, I talked to so many people about avoiding burnout, and here I am feeling like I'm experiencing it. And so I think I was almost getting down on myself that I was like experiencing, because I wasn't experiencing it for a long time. Like I got out of a major multi-year kind of rut a year and a half ago or so. And then I was like just on a high for a long time as we were creating and building and doing a lot of stuff. And then I felt it for the first time in the last few weeks or 6 weeks or so. And it was like, no, I'm not allowed to do this, because this is what I talk about. Like, I can't let this happen to me. And I'm like, no, it's okay. Like, just take a step back and reassess what's going on and get back to the normal routines that you were successful at, instead of trying to spread yourself too thin again. And that was, you get back to that scatterbrain. And that's where flow comes in, is when you have that efficient work, you're bringing it all back in, you're solely focused on the task at hand, and you're doing it in an efficient manner where you're knocking it out quickly and you're not scattered all, even if you got a million things going at once and you need to get them all accomplished, make your list down of prioritize the fires that you need to put out, and just focus on knocking off one by one and seeing that progress go over time, as opposed to, I got all this stuff and I gotta do this and I gotta do this and I gotta do that and this and whatever. And, these people are expecting something of me. I know, and it's like, no, just bring it back a second, reassess, slow it down, and then get back to your routines. And that's what I've been able to do, and nip that in the bud and not let it become a multi-year thing again. Right. And just like down for a while. And so it's crazy that you go through this work, like this self-work that we've been going through, and when you do fall into those valleys a little bit on a personal level, how you can get yourself back out, because you know what you need to do. You just need maybe some time, take an adventure, go off the grid a little bit. We just got back from Woods Canyon Lake, no service whatsoever. It's the best little camping trip we do every single year. And that was what I needed. Like, we'd been on some other trips. I did an amazing trip with my wife, with Kim, went to California, went to Laguna Beach. It was just her and I, a weekend getaway. That was beautiful. It was amazing. And then that was piggybacked off of another little staycation that we did and other things. Like, we were trying to fill the void of we hadn't done any trips or anything like that for months, 4 months, I would say. And then we just did 3 back to back in a row. And it was during those times where I was like having some, but it wasn't until this camping trip, like my wife and I's trip was amazing to reconnect and just really enjoy each other. And then this camping trip with no service, no screen time, no nothing, with the kids and the family, like those back to back just really did it for me. Like, this is what life's about. These are the people that love me. These are the people I love. And this is what I need to get back to doing, and being the person that I am, and not worry about the uncontrollables. And so that ambiguity too, like that lack of clarity and that meaning and that potential of confusion. And there's a lot of people that don't necessarily know what it is that you're doing or creating or whatever, especially if it's new. And so it's not your job to have to, or feel like you have to explain yourself. Just put in the work and do it and continue, and they'll figure it out for themselves. But don't let them bring you down if they're not fully understanding the craft that you're honing in on and the actions that you're taking, if you know it's the right path for you.
Yeah, there's this phase, and Junto's helped a lot. Rhett Coots, if you're listening, has helped a lot, and realize that I haven't spoken with some of those people in a while. There's this spot you get when you're creating, even if you're as a professional, and it's really alone. It's an alone feeling. You could have the best friends in the world, but that's where I'm honestly super grateful for you. And this, again, back to the consistency, showing up each week, it's kept me on the path. And the conversation like this, it's so funny that's coming at the same time. We're both in such similar moments and had similar weekends this past weekend, where you've got something burning inside of you that is, you have to get it out. But if it's not focused or compartmentalized properly, it just feels alone. And that's not acceptable. We know the tools. This is what we put in the work for. And so we're building our own case study. And this episode, if we choose to release it at this point, we're getting it all out in the open.
We'll release this. Who cares? Anyone got don't care. I'm an open book.
We are open books. This is what it's about. And that bamboo shoot, I'm sure it's sometimes when you're watering it, you run short of water and you have to go back and get the water. I just came up with that on the spot, by the way.
Bamboo banger. I love it.
Bamboo banger. Go back and get some water, hydration. But I think just to get it back on track to the routines piece, which is probably the number one topic we talk about on this, you have been a huge, I felt like mine was dialed in. And then I've seen you on the fitness piece where I felt like I was pushing you a while ago. You've got me making sure I'm showing up to jujitsu. Like the pictures you're posting, your physique is different this year. Like you look like a different human being. You look vital. Not that you were, slothly before, but it's noticeable. And
the dad bod was real 6 months ago, a year ago for sure. So we're changing that up a bit.
And I think it's so cool to see how in Junto, in some of my, the friend groups that were around, people are curious and asking questions. And the business athlete is something that has become a true theme. And that is a part of my meditations, my self-hypnosis is something that's becoming an identity. And I think it solves a lot of problems when you're feeling alone, like getting into that mindset of, I know what I have to do. I know my mission. Get organized, get it down on paper. You want to talk about a slump? I was looking through my journal and don't get me wrong. There's stuff written in it every day, but it's chaos. It's not the thoughts of consciousness or anything like that. So it's another thing that just get it out on paper. It sounds so simple, but writing takes so much more work than just the echo chamber that is your head. And getting it out on paper, and Paul is doing it, or we're doing it together. Get it down on paper, and it's amazing what can happen.
It is amazing. I experienced that quite a bit through the storybook, the weekly newsletter. It's almost turned into my diary, if you will. It's just kind of how I think about the week or what's going on in my life. But I don't share too much of like, oh, this is everything that I'm doing. It's not I. It's very much like just to help me come up and with the topic. But writing those, I write 1,500, anywhere from 1,200 to 1,800 words a week for that. And, I spent some time putting that out, and that's been helpful too. So along with the podcast and helping the discipline and consistency of wanting to do something every single week. And even Kim was like, don't focus so much on building all these things that your mind won't stop racing thinking about. Just dial it back in for the summer, focus on the podcast, focus on the storybook, focus on us, and focus on yourself. And I was like, it was just music to my ears. It was just beautiful. And so having that conversation with her, and we had that conversation when we were in California a couple weeks back, and having that conversation with her just really opened my eyes. Like, you're right. I just need to slow it down a little bit. Like, I've got many other priorities, right, in my current business. And I have, and this is all just extra stuff that we're doing just for ourselves. And so kind of bring that in. But going back to the storybook, I just love writing that thing. I don't journal every day like you do, and it's something that I definitely admire you for. I kind of have, my daily power, like quick notes that I complete, but I'm not writing at length outside of the storybook. And so I just use that storybook as a way to get my thoughts out, creative outlet out, come up with a topic and learn and grow, and then share it with the subscribers. And it's free, and it's just something fun that I love to do. So that's been helpful. So I agree with you. The more you can get out of your head and on paper or in an email, starting a newsletter is easier than ever now. I mean, Beehive is the program I use, BEEHIIV.com, and it's free. I mean, up to 20, I think it's up to 1,000 subscribers or whatever. It's free. So if anyone's thinking about doing a newsletter, that's what I use. It's an amazing program, super easy, but it also just builds a little bit of a community. I get some replies back, and that keeps me going and whatnot. And so it's a lot of fun, but writing things down will absolutely get you out of that VUCA mindset and the things that are coming at you. And you're like, dang, that was a rough week. And you write that stuff down, and then all of a sudden next week you have a better week, and you just kind of look back on some of that stuff and like, I guess it wasn't that bad.
Absolutely, man. And you say you admire me for the journaling. You shouldn't. I had I remember when I first started getting into self-help and I started looking at like Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks and picked up this book, Mark Twain's notebooks. And I started, I was like, this is so cool. They're just random thoughts and his handwriting is worse than mine. Paula said she's admitted to she's tried to read my journal and she can't.
Is it his actual handwriting in that book, or is it like
yeah, with like, excerpts so translated and breaking down what he was writing down? It's pretty cool. And so if anyone cares to read my notebook someday, which is probably unlikely, they'll probably need to be transcribed like someone did for his, but they've been fun to look back on. Well, they say that poor handwriting is like number one symptoms of ADHD. So, man, if you look at,
you should look at my whiteboard that I'm staring at.
At least they're not stuck in our head, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to get this back on track. I in my notes I had written down when looking at VUCA and some of the things that we were talking about diet, but I realized I hate the word diet. I just hate that word every time I say it or hear it. I don't know if that's me being groomed by what I've heard in the past, but instead thinking about what we're consuming, right? We talk about creation over consumption, but we've got to consume. So that's our food. I can go down the rabbit hole of I can drive Paula nuts with what I'm trying to consume and tinker with on what makes me feel vital. But when we're talking about VUCA and everything that's going on in the world right now, multiple wars that the U.S. is involved in, whether, we're hearing it or not. Again, this isn't fear mongering. What's going on in the world? We're a global economy now, and everything affects everything. And being where we are in the position of the United States, it just is what it is. But your consumption or diet on what you're consuming from an information is so important. We can find ourselves, the algorithms are so good, and you have to curate who you're following. And even then, they're going to throw advertisements or information that they think is going to get you staying on those applications, spending money, and not putting your energy on what we talked about, the mission, your family, your business, these things that are really the important things. Now, I have in my notes, you can't have your head in the sand. You and I've talked a lot about how we'll dance around certain political conversations and it can come across as, oh, they've got their head in the sand. It's not it at all. You need to be informed. You need to know, what your rights are, what the government is doing. You need to do that research, but you have to curate it and put parameters around it and be intentional with what you're consuming, because that is what is going to take your consciousness and come through with your actions. And so just can't stress enough, taking a look at who you're following, what your news consumption is, how much time you're spending on Netflix. All of these things, you have to do an audit of what you're consuming and designing your life the way you want it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and those algorithms are crazy too. Like once you start going down a rabbit hole of negativity or stuff that you're not learning from, it just fills your feed up. The next thing you scroll up, the next two, it's this one, and then if you pause there for multiple seconds, then all of a sudden the next one's the same thing. But if you were to flip that and you find I follow a guy like Zach Progab, who we've talked about, or Sahil Bloom, who's another big fitness guy, or Nick Bear's another big fitness guy that's inspiration. He's creating the hybrid athlete, the guy that a buff guy who's changing what it looks like to be a runner as well. So a guy that lifts weights and runs, as opposed to the skinny runner. And so he's kind of changing that kind. So if you follow some of those types of guys or other people, in the business world, like what's her name? Is it Cody Sanchez? Who's killing it and buying businesses and teaching people how to buy small businesses and go from there. Like that type of content, you start filling your mind up with learning, entrepreneurial stuff, health stuff. That algorithm will just start feeding you with it constantly. If you pause and watch their videos, then it'll just over time it starts feeding you that. So I think that's a good reminder for sure. If you find yourself in the TikTok abyss under just nonsense stuff, that's all you're going to get. And then your life can be potentially in chaos because it's just brainless activity, which in fact, I got caught in that. And Kim was like, what are you looking at? And there was a dude, I thought it was really impressive, but this dude was juggling 3 apples and eating them as he was juggling them. like he would catch it and take a bite as he was juggling. I'm like, it was the most ridiculous video ever. She goes, "This is what you're spending your time on?" Like, so she even knows that I'm not this type of guy, because she's like, "What are you doing?" And I go, "I don't know it." Like, it catches the best of us, right? Like, you just.
I'm only laughing because I do the same thing. There'll be some golf video, or not even golf. Golf would be justifiable, but to a similar note, then Paul is like, "Really, you're talking to me about my information diet?" I'm like, it's too good. Like, and this gets to human creators, and I'll flip this on the positive side. What gives me this overwhelming optimism is that the economy is shifting to the individual, in the sense that it's so cool to see how creative the average human being is. These are not sponsored individuals. These are people that are putting the time in to say, what can I do? What skills, whether it's humor, physical capability, or my just life in general, how can I get this out to the world to provide some entertainment? And that gives me a ton of optimism that people are taking control and actually creating. Yeah. And it's up to us on whether or not we're going to pay attention to them, which is a whole nother conversation. But that brings me such optimism when I see it. I'm proud of these individuals that are finding ways to create their own income by being entertainers. Better when it's educational, but I will say that is a positive note.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's definitely a shift from the influencer to the thought leader, and that goes a long way. And then you have the creator. The creator is the one that's there to entertain. It's like watching a comedy character, right? It's like watching a comedy show, an actor or something like that. And it's just shifted from the movies to YouTube or TikTok or Reels on Instagram and Facebook. And so, and these big social media platforms are paying these people well for their views, right? I think it's like $10 for every 1,000 views you get on YouTube. So imagine 1 million plus views, like they're making thousands of dollars per video. And so of course, and like, look at Mr. Beast, that guy who's just the biggest YouTuber of all. And he's got a full blown staff and production company. He's entertainment. He's an entertainer. And so I think it's cool to, whether it's stupid or not, if you're the one consuming it all and not creating on your own, I think that's the point, is go ahead and consume it, but also create on your own and just put stuff out there and put your story out there, whether it's making people laugh, whether it's a creative outlet just to, share your story or an educator as a thought leader and teaching things, your skills and expertise and sharing that with others, putting that out there outside of your normal 9-to-5 or your normal business or whatever, I think helps you get out of those ruts and stay out of those ruts, because you're constantly creating and you're coming up with new ideas and you're learning and growing. Yes, focus on your core business. Yes, focus on your family, focus on yourself. But don't forget about the creation piece, whether it's a podcast or a newsletter or YouTube or whatever, right? Just something. And I agree. I think it is cool to see some of that stuff. Just don't get lost in the consumption only and no creation outside of that.
Absolutely. And on this topic of VUCA, one of the quotes that just keeps popping up in my head, the most succinct way to describe where we're at right now with the chaos in the world is, and I can't remember who said it. I'll have to Google it, put it in the show notes, or just the listeners can. But we have primal brains, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And that is a dangerous combination. And ever since I heard it, it scared the crap out of me, because I was like, holy cow, that is the problem. And I've just pondered it and pondered and pondered it. And the two on the end, it's how do we take care of the primal brains and allow those, they're never going to catch up with the technology, even though it is technology in itself, but allowing that technology that's in our primal brains to utilize the godlike technology that who knows in what facet that's going to be controlled or not, but bringing those two together are going to force the medieval institutions to catch up to both of those things. And I'm sorry, we're going off the deep end now, but that quote has just made me really think a different way on what the future looks like, what kind of skills I'm trying to build. And but the best way to function to design this life of success for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to close and wrap up this episode, going back to your AI discussion early on, it's here to stay. Leverage it, use it. It's not going to replace you. It's only going to replace you if you don't use it or learn about it. And so I think you just need to understand how it can be useful, and leverage it when you're out there creating and, using that godlike technology. It's there for anyone to use. And I think it'll also help in the health sector in terms of longevity and being open to learning about some of that stuff as well, which is all just very interesting stuff. And, time will tell how it's going to shake out. It's just going to be wild how fast things are going to. We thought 10 years ago, I don't know, when did the iPhone come out? 15 years ago? It's like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there was like no Ubers, no iPhones, no, like all this stuff that we're so used to. Like, imagine what it's going to be like 10 years from now, and then 5 years, it's constant growth. So just continuing the creation and being plugged in and understanding what's happening around you to be able to leverage that as opportunities for future growth.
It's exponential. If you're feeling the VUCA, feeling the burnout, reach out to us. I think it's official. We're out of the slump after this episode. We're off to the races. Let us know what you'd like to hear. We got some great guests coming at you in the next couple months, over the next couple months. So tune in for that and let us know what you want to hear about. Back at you next week.